Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will still get paid millions of dollars for doing absolutely nothing.
If you came up with the picture of an annoying, insufferable white woman, it would be Meghan Markle, even though she's not white.
You have generously offered to keep the wax figures of Harry and Meghan safe.
Yeah, that's correct. And if I may, I would just like to say that I'm definitely not using the wax figures for sex stuff.
In California, we're just a regular couple living close to Oprah and far from the paparazzi. But not too far.
What do you mean by that?
I watched the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. Now, I'll be honest with you, before I watched it, I was not a fan of theirs. But now I've actually heard their side of the story, I f***ing hate them.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the f***?
Oh, Pads, you cracked me up. And not that sort of crack, obviously.
What happens when the polished facade of celebrity finally cracks? When the carefully staged interviews, the glowing magazine covers, and the endless PR spin collide headfirst with something raw and uncontrollable. Laughter? Because that's exactly what happened when Jo Koy stepped on Golden Globe stage. In a matter of minutes, the comedian didn't tell a few jokes, he didn't just roast a couple of royals. He detonated a cultural time bomb that had been ticking for years. For Harry and Meghan, this wasn't just another headline. This was a global moment of truth. Think about it. For years, Meghan and Harry built their brand around control. They wanted to control the narrative of their exit from the royal family. They wanted to control the way the media covered them. They wanted to control how Hollywood saw them not as ex-royals, but as modern icons, creators, and voices of change. But the one thing they couldn't control is comedy. Because comedy doesn't bend PR strategy. It doesn't obey palace rules. Comedy says out loud what everyone else is thinking. And on that night, Jo Koy didn't just crack a joke, he cracked them. He spoke the unspeakable in front of very people who had signed their Netflix deals, bought their books, and plastered them across magazine covers. In front of the Hollywood elite, he said what the world was already whispering, that Meghan and Harry had become the ultimate example of getting paid millions for doing nothing. The reaction was instant. Gasps, laughter, shock. The reaction was instant. Gasps, laughter, shock. It wasn't polite chuckling, it wasn't forced applause. It was genuine, because deep down everyone in that room knew it was true. And in comedy, truth hits harder than anything. Jo Koy had just been voice to the frustration that had been simmering, not just in Britain, not just in tabloids, but in Hollywood itself. And here's why this matters. When a comedian makes you the punchline, it's not just about one night. It signals a shift. For years, the Sussexes carefully positioned themselves as victims of unfair treatment, as inspirational figures building a new kind of brand. But the moment the audience really laughed at their expense, it was like the curtain dropped. They weren't inspirational anymore. They were material. That's the real power of what happened at the Golden Globes. It wasn't about one joke or one comedian. It was about the permission it gave. Permission for other celebrities to speak their minds. Permission for late-night hosts to stop holding back. Permission for even everyday people to say out loud what they really thought. In the span of a few punchlines, the entire narrative shifted. And that's the story we're breaking down tonight. Because Jo Koy's monologue wasn't a set of jokes. It was the spark that lit a wildfire. A wildfire that spread to late-night TV, sketches, to brutal stand-up routines, and to the kind of cultural satire that doesn't just sting for a day, it lingers for years. We'll look at the exact jokes that kicked it all off. We'll see how Hollywood turned their private frustrations into very public mockery. We'll dive into the savage world of satire, where Meghan and Harry became literal puppets and cartoon characters. And then we'll hear from stand-up legends who didn't just tell jokes, they delivered reality checks so devastating they stripped away Sussex's entire public image. Because this story isn't just about Meghan and Harry. It's about what happens when the public and the industry that once celebrated you decides it's done, leaving your story. And instead of applause, all you hear is laughter. So let's start at the beginning. The night Jo Koy, live on stage at the Golden Globes, said out loud what the rest of Hollywood had been dying to say for years. The Golden Globes has always had a reputation for chaos. Unlike the stuffier Oscars, the Globes rely on unpredictability. People drink too much at their tables, the cameras catch awkward reactions, and the host usually ends up stealing headlines. Think Ricky Gervais calling out Hollywood hypocrisy to their faces. Think Tina Fey and Amy Poehler roasting Leonardo DiCaprio's dating life. It's the one award show where the jokes matter almost as much as the awards themselves. So when Jo Koy took the stage, everyone expected a few jabs. What they didn't expect was the line that would turn the room upside down. He started harmless enough, compare the royal family to the crown. Safe, easy, topical. Then he sharpened the blade, take a swing at Harry, joking that his financial desperation had gotten so bad, he was asking actors for money. The crowd would laugh, the kind of laugh that says, "Oh, we're going."
Just a great series about a rich, white, dysfunctional family, all scheming. Oh no, that's the crown. That's the crown. I'm sorry.
Take a swing at Harry, joking that his financial desperation had gotten so bad, he was asking actors for money. The crowd would laugh, the kind of laugh that says, "Oh, we're going there tonight." But then came the punchline that would echo across the internet within hours. Jo Koy
Turns out Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will still get paid millions of dollars for doing absolutely nothing. And that's just by Netflix.
Jo Koy, standing in front of the elite, said, "Turns out Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will still get paid millions of dollars for doing absolutely nothing. That's just by Netflix." Boom. The laughter was different this time. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't polite, and it was cathartic. The cameras cut to celebrities trying to hide their smirks, but it was too late, the dam had broken. Why did this line hit so hard? Because it wasn't just a joke, it was a truth. A truth Hollywood insiders had been whispering about since the moment Netflix signed a $100 million check for the Sussex's production company. Where was the content? Where was the groundbreaking documentary? Where were the projects that justified the hype? To most people in the industry, it felt like a cash grab. Now, Jo Koy had said it out loud. The timing couldn't have been worse for Meghan and Harry. Public opinion was already shifting. Their next documentary had been met with more ridicule than respect. Harry's memoir had become late-night material, and their Spotify deal had collapsed in embarrassment, with even insiders calling them grifters. So, when Jo Koy delivered that joke, it didn't feel mean, it felt inevitable. But here's the key detail. This wasn't a tabloid headline or a YouTube commentator saying it. This was the Golden Globes. This was Hollywood itself, laughing at them. And that makes all the difference. Because when the industry that once embraced you starts mocking you, your brain is in serious trouble. That night, Jo Koy didn't just tell a joke. He cracked open a new chapter in Meghan and Harry's public story. A chapter where they weren't the glamorous royals escaping tradition. They weren't inspirational figures speaking truth to power. They were just another punchline in a room full of celebrities who had finally decided they'd had enough. And once the laughter started, it didn't stop. Jo Koy lit the match. The rest of Hollywood was about to pour gasoline on it. Once Jo Koy cracked the dam, the flood couldn't be stopped. Almost overnight, Meghan Markle transformed from a controversial figure into Hollywood's most reliable punchline. And when late-night television smells blood in the water, it doesn't let go. Jimmy Fallon was one of the first to pick up the thread. Known for his lighthearted, goofy humor, Fallon rarely gets mean, but even he couldn't resist. He zeroed in on Meghan's Netflix lifestyle show with love. Meghan, a series, was supposed to showcase her as a visionary tastemaker. Instead, it gave birth to something far stranger. Meghan relabeled store-bought snacks into her own cute packaging. To Fallon,
why does Meghan Markle make her own pretzel bags? They don't know why.
That's interesting. She takes it from one bag and puts it in another bag.
Another bag.
And that confuses people.
To Fallon, the absurdity was irresistible. He cracked, "Why does Meghan Markle make her own pretzel bags? She takes it from one bag and puts it in a bag. Who is this confusing? Everyone." The audience howled. Why? Because it wasn't just a silly anecdote. It summed up everything critics already believed about Meghan, that her products weren't authentic, that they were performative, and that her brand was more about image than substance. A Netflix show that reduced her to pretzel bag rebranding became the perfect metaphor, and Fallon made sure the world laughed at it. And then came Stephen Colbert, who went even sharper. He mocked their supposedly private nicknames, M and H. To Harry and Meghan, these nicknames were intimate, a way to humanize their relationship for the public. But to Colbert, they were cringeworthy. He exaggerated their awkwardness, showing how out of touch it sounded when they tried to take it in.
Meghan Markle has finally revealed why she and Prince Harry call each other M and H. and he'll say M and you'll say H and your friends say M and it just is a thing.
It's a thing.
And do you both love it?
Yes, and I like nicknames a lot.
What could it be? A mystery for the ages.
Showing how out of touch it sounded when they tried to make it endearing. In Colbert's hands, M&H wasn't sweet. It was self-important, the kind of contrived branding that begged to be ridiculed. Saturday Night Live smelled the opportunity too, and once SNL decides your material, there's no going back. They launched sketches where Alex Moffat played a pompous Prince William and
unfortunately, William's hair was unable to make it this evening. It's devastating. Come on, just shave it, Will.
Okay, just shut up about the hair.
What hair? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I made him mad. I love you.
Whenever the kids are being fussy and not going to bed, she puts on an episode of Suits and they're out. So, what are you doing? Ow! Stop it! Stop it!
And Mike Day, the clueless, dim-witted Harry. The sketches always leaned on Meghan's show suits, portraying it as irrelevant and boring. One skit joked, only difference between her show and this one is that people actually watch this one. Another gag painted Suits as so dull it could put children to sleep faster than a bedtime story. These jokes were brutal, but what made them sting even more was how mainstream they became. Meghan wasn't being roasted by fringe voices on YouTube or conservative tabloids. She was being mocked on The Tonight Show, on SNL, on the biggest stages of American comedy. Her brand wasn't collapsing in private corners of the internet. It was collapsing on live television in front of millions. And the jabs weren't just about her projects. They were about her relationship, her choices, even her presence in Hollywood. One SNL joke compared Harry giving up his royal life for Meghan to Elon Musk buying Twitter. The comparison was savage. Elon
built electric cars, he's going to Mars. Why is he even involving himself with Twitter? It would be like if the Prince of England gave it all up just to marry an actor from Suits.
Comparison is savage. Elon, a man conquering space and revolutionizing cars, suddenly wasting his energy on social media. Harry, a Prince of England, giving it all up for an actress from Suits. The subtext was clear Meghan wasn't worth the trade. For Meghan and Harry, this was devastating. Hollywood had once been their ally. Talk show hosts used to fawn for them. Audiences once applauded their independence. Now the applause had shifted to laughter. And this was the kind of laughter you couldn't spin with PR or erase with another interview. But as harsh as late-night television was, things were about to escalate even further. Because once satire enters the picture, once puppets and cartoons start lampooning you, you're not just mocked, you're immortalized as a cultural joke. If late-night television turned Meghan and Harry into punchlines, satire cemented them as caricatures. And there's something uniquely brutal about satire. A joke on Fallon lasts for a night. Sketch on SNL trends for a week. But when you're turned into a puppet or a cartoon character, you live forever as a parody of yourself. And that's exactly what happened. First came Spitting Image, the legendary British puppet show famous for skewering politicians, royals, and celebrities. Their version of Harry was devastating.
I'm Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, just a regular guy with a title like anyone else who's fifth in line to the throne.
Their version of Harry was devastating. He introduced himself with exaggerated cluelessness. I'm Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, just a regular guy with a title like anyone else who's fifth in line to the throne. The line landed because it exposed contradiction at the heart of Harry's normal guy branding. He wanted to be relatable, but he couldn't escape the privilege and title he still clung to. The show didn't stop there. They painted Harry as lazy and untalented, someone making millions from podcasting despite lacking any real skills. In one sketch, Harry bragged, "I'm here to tell my truth and make a ton of money out of podcasting since I don't have any discernible talent." The exaggeration stung because it didn't feel entirely exaggerated. To viewers, it sounded like exactly what was happening. And the punches kept coming. Spitting Image mocked his obsession with his royal ranking, showing him waking up every morning just to Google if he was still fifth in line to the throne. They ridiculed his Netflix deal, portraying it as nothing more than a giant cash grab. They even mocked his supposed freedom from Granny's rules, with the joke being that while he claimed independence, Meghan was the one really in charge. Then came South Park, the American juggernaut of satire, with an episode so savage it went viral instantly. The worldwide privacy.
It has been several months now since our beloved queen has died. Our Canadians are finding it hard to go on. All Canadians, that is, except for our first guest, the prince and his wife. We want privacy! We want privacy!
The worldwide private tour. In it, Harry and Meghan portrayed as the only two people in Canada not mourning the Queen's death. They chanted, "We want privacy," while parading through media circuits, publishing books, and appearing on TV shows. The hypocrisy was laid bare, demanding privacy while simultaneously chasing fame. Writers didn't have to stretch reality to make it funny. They simply exaggerated the contradictions everyone already saw. Harry's memoir was mocked as a privileged prince crying about hardship. Meghan's media appearances were portrayed as desperate attempts for attention under the guise of victimhood. The most iconic scene showed the couple leaving Canada in search of privacy, while screaming about privacy through megaphones. Eventually, they found a quiet town that was empty and peaceful. But instead of staying, they panicked, because quiet wasn't what they really wanted. The message was devastatingly clear. They never truly wanted privacy. They wanted attention on their own terms. That episode spread like wildfire. Clips dominated Twitter. Reaction videos filled YouTube. The hashtag #WorldPrivacy Tour trended globally. For many, South Park's parody wasn't just funny, it was definitive. It captured in 20 minutes what endless interviews and books had failed to cover, that Meghan and Harry's public image was built on contradictions, and those contradictions were now impossible to ignore. Being turned into puppets and cartoon characters cemented their fall. They weren't tragic heroes anymore. They weren't glamorous rebels rewriting the rules. They were caricatures, exaggerated versions of themselves, immortalized in comedy sketches that would outlive their latest projects. And while satire was brutal, it was only the warm-up for what came next. Because once stand-up comedians got their turn, the gloves came off completely. If Jo Koy lit a fuse at the Golden Globes and late-night tea poured gasoline on it, then Chris Rock came in with a blowtorch. Because when Chris Rock takes aim at you, the jokes aren't just funny, they cut to the bone. During one of his stand-up specials, Rock zeroed in on Meghan's now infamous Oprah interview. For many viewers, that interview had been Meghan's defining attempt. During one of his stand-up specials, Rock zeroed in on Meghan's now infamous Oprah interview.
Gone on Oprah, I didn't know. I had no idea how racist they were. It's the royal family. You didn't Google these motherfuckers?
For many viewers, that interview was Meghan's defining attempt to rewrite her story. She told the world she had no idea what she was walking into when she married into the royal family. She claimed she didn't understand the weight of royal traditions, didn't expect the scrutiny, didn't even think to Google the man she was about to marry. To her, it was a story of innocence.
That's like marrying into the Budweiser family and going, they drink a lot. This is invested in slavery like it was Shark Tank.
To her, it was a story of innocence. To Rock, it was absurd. On stage, he looked at the crowd with his trademark smirk and said, "She didn't know the royal family was racist? It's the royal family. You didn't Google these people?" The room erupted. And it wasn't just laughter, it was recognition. Rock had tapped into the same skepticism millions of people felt. The idea that Meghan, a savvy actress who had lived in the spotlight, didn't think to look up the most famous family on earth. It strained belief. But Rock didn't stop there. He doubled down, comparing the situation to marrying into the Budweiser family and then acting shocked they drank beer. The analogy was brutal in simplicity. In one stroke, he made Meghan's claim not just unbelievable, but laughable. Because comedy thrives on truth. And Rock's point was crystal clear. Meghan's ignorance wasn't innocence, it was willful denial. Then he went further, calling the royals the original racists. It was a line that landed like a hammer. On the surface, it was a joke about the monarchy's long history of empire and colonialism. But in the context of Meghan's Oprah revelations, it reframed her narrative entirely. To Rock, Meghan hadn't exposed anything shocking. She had stated the obvious, and building a victim narrative around something so obvious only made her look foolish. The genius of Rock's takedown was that it didn't feel cruel. It felt inevitable. He wasn't ridiculing her pain, he was ridiculing the way she framed it. By treating the royal family like a shocking discovery, Meghan had left herself wide open. And Chris Rock, a master of observational comedy, simply walked through the door she left ajar. For Meghan and Harry, this was devastating because Rock's words didn't stay in the comedy club. They became headlines, they spread across social media, They reached audiences who might never have cared about the Oprah interview, but knew enough to laugh at the absurdity. And once Chris Rock calls you out, your story doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the public's laughter. But Rock was just the beginning. Because while his jokes shredded Meghan's narrative, another comedian across the Atlantic was about to go even further, not with analogies, but with raw contempt. If Chris Rock's jokes were sharp bells, Simon Brodkin came swinging with a sledgehammer. Known in the UK for his bold, often outrageous comedy, Brodkin doesn't hold back. And he turned his attention to Meghan and Harry's Netflix documentary, Gloves Were Off. He admitted he hadn't been a fan of the couple to begin with, but then dropped the line that defined his entire set. I watched their Netflix documentary. He admitted he hadn't been a fan of the couple to begin with, but then he dropped the line that defined his entire set. I watched their Netflix documentary. Now that I've heard their side of the story, I've asterisking hate them.
I watched the Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. Now, I'll be honest with you, before I watched it, I was not a fan of theirs. But now I've actually heard their side of the story, I hate them.
Crowd roared. The reason it worked so well is because it captured a sentiment many viewers had quietly felt. Instead of softening opinions, the documentary hardened them. Instead of sympathy, it created irritation. And Brodkin said the quiet part out loud. From there, he tore the documentary apart piece by piece. He mocked their nicknames H and M, rolling his eyes at how self-important it sounded. To him, it wasn't cute or intimate, it was contrived, an attempt to make their relationship look special when it came off as smug. The audience didn't just laugh, they nodded along, recognizing how grating those little details felt. He also zeroed in on Harry's infamous description of a date with Meghan when Harry claimed they pulled the pin on a fun grenade. To Brodkin, that line was so cringeworthy it was almost parody. He quipped that hearing it made him root for Prince Andrew instead. It was shocking, it was harsh, and it was the kind of gut punch humor that stuck in people's heads. But Brodkin didn't stop at cringe. He went after the very foundation of their complaints. The documentary presented normal royal traditions, like curtsying the Queen as if they were shocking, even traumatic. Meghan acted baffled that she had to show respect to Harry's grandmother.
Harry says, how do you explain to someone who've just started dating that they have to curtsy to your own grandmother?
How do you explain that you bow to your grandmother and that you will need to curtsy, especially to an American? Like, that's weird.
And I'm thinking, maybe just tell her that your grandmother is the f***ing Queen.
Meghan acted baffled that she had to show respect to Harry's grandmother. Brodkin cut through one line. Maybe just tell her your grandmother is the Queen. Simple, logical, and devastatingly funny. The final straw for him was their complaints about paying for their own security. For a couple living in multi-million-dollar mansions, the idea of whining about footing their own bills rang hollow. Brodkin admitted that after 6 episodes of hearing them complain, he wanted to attack them himself. The audience laughed not because they agreed with violence, but because the exaggeration reflected their own frustration. By the end of his routine, Meghan and Harry weren't sympathetic figures. They were spoiled, whiny, and out of touch. Brodkin's takedown mattered because it wasn't happening in America, where criticism of Meghan often gets tangled up in culture wars. This was Britain. This was the home turf. And when a British comedian dismissed the Sussexes as laughable, it wasn't about politics. It was about authenticity. To his audience, Meghan and Harry weren't brave truth-tellers. They were caricatures of entitlement. With Brodkin, the ridicule reached a new low or a new high, depending on how you looked at it. Because his performance wasn't just a few jokes, it was demolition. And once comedians start tearing apart your every word, your every complaint, your every attempt to build sympathy, the question becomes, what's left of your public image? But believe it or not, the worst's still to come. Because while Rock and Brodkin landed brutal blows, Nikki Glaser was preparing to draw a reality check so savage, it cut deeper than any punchline before it. By the time Nikki Glaser stepped up, Meghan and Harry had already been the butt of countless jokes. But Glaser did something different. She didn't rely on parody, puppets, or exaggerated stories. She went straight for the jugular with one devastatingly simple point. On stage, Glaser said what millions of people were already whispering: if Meghan hadn't married Harry, she'd be just another contestant on The Bachelor, fighting for a rose. The audience erupted not just because it was funny, but because it was brutally honest. Unlike Chris Rock's sharp observations or Simon Brodkin's rage-fueled dismantling, Glaser's take was surgical. She stripped away all the glamour, all the media spin, all the Netflix deals, and reduced Meghan back to what she might have been without Harry, a struggling actress hoping for her big break. A woman whose defining role in Suits was respected, but hardly iconic. Without the crown, without the royal title, without the endless media frenzy, Meghan wasn't special. She was just Meghan M from Sherman Oaks, barista. That's what made Glazer's reality check so powerful. It wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was a grounding moment. A reminder. That's what made Glazer's reality check so powerful. It wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was a grounding moment. A reminder that fame can be fragile, and that some difference between global stardom and complete anonymity is nothing more than the person married. The crowd's reaction showed how much the sentiment resonated. People laughed, yes, but they also nodded, because there's something universally relatable about that truth. How much of our lives are defined by chance encounters, by timing, by luck. In Meghan's case, that luck had been elevated to an absurd level. Glazer's delivery made it sting more. She wasn't angry, she wasn't bitter, she was almost casual, as if pointing out the obvious. That tone is what made the joke linger. It didn't feel like an attack from someone with an agenda. It felt like an honest observation that cut through all the noise. For Meghan, this was perhaps the most dangerous critique of all. You can argue with a late-night host's parody, you can dismiss a pup show as just satire, but how do you fight against a joke that feels like an undeniable truth? You can't spin it, you can't PR manage it. Because the more you try to argue, the more you confirm the very fragility the joke exposed. And here's the brutal irony. Meghan built her brand on the idea of being extraordinary, breaking barriers, rewriting narratives, modernizing the monarchy. But in Glazer's framing, she wasn't extraordinary at all. She was ordinary. And that for a celebrity is the harshest punchline of all. Nikki Glazer's reality check was short, sharp, and unforgettable, and in many ways is the natural setup for what came next, a voice outside of stand-up comedy, but no less savage. Because while comedians used punchlines, Bill Maher delivered something even heavier, philosophy. Nikki Glazer cut Meghan down to size with blunt honesty. Bill Maher dismantled the Suss's with cold analysis. Maher, known for his biting political commentary,
You know, you can't be, these people were so mean to us, poor us, and we don't want all this attention, and then let me write a book about how much we don't want attention.
Maher, known for his biting political commentary, isn't usually focused on celebrity gossip. But when he finally spoke about Harry and Meghan, it wasn't jokes delivered, it was judgment. His central point, hypocrisy. Maher argued that Meghan and Harry's entire public strategy was built on wanting it both ways. They wanted to be rebels, but they also wanted royal status. They wanted privacy, but they also wanted Netflix cameras. They wanted sympathy, but they also wanted multi-million-dollar deals. And to Maher, that contradiction wasn't just frustrating, it was ridiculous. He mocked their constant complaints about the media while simultaneously writing books, giving interviews, and producing documentaries. He pointed out the absurdity of Harry and Meghan demanding the spotlight on their terms while lashing out at anyone who questioned them. You can't be like, we don't want attention, and then drop a tell-all memoir. Maher scoffed. The hypocrisy was obvious, and the audience knew it. But Maher didn't stop there. He contrasted the couple's fragility with the stoic philosophy of Queen Elizabeth. The late queen lived by the motto, never complain, never explain. Maher highlighted the dignity in that approach, a sharp contrast to Harry and Meghan's endless stream of grievances. He painted the Sussexes as fragile, unable to withstand criticism, obsessed with controlling their own image. And that's what made Maher's critique so devastating. While comedians laughed at Meghan and Harry, Maher dismissed them. He didn't even find them worthy of sympathy. To him, they weren't tragic victims or inspired rebels. They were spoiled children demanding the world bend to their narrative. He ended with a point that stuck with viewers. Meghan and Harry's biggest flaw wasn't their hypocrisy or even their fragility. It was their arrogance. The arrogance of insisting that everyone else, media, the public, Hollywood, even the monarchy itself, play along with their personal drama. To Maher, that arrogance was the most unforgivable sin of all. And perhaps that's why his words resonated so deeply. Because in a world where the public is constantly bombarded with celebrity narratives, people crave authenticity. They don't mind flaws, they don't mind mistakes, but they hate being manipulated. And in Maher's framing, Harry and Meghan weren't just flawed, they were manipulative. They insisted on controlling the narrative even as it fell apart around them. For Meghan and Harry, this was catastrophic. Jokes can sting, satire can bruise, but philosophical judgment, that can end a brand. Maher stripped away the last illusion of their story. He reframed them not as unfairly maligned, not as tragic, not even as entertaining. He reframed them as irrelevant. And once that happens, what's left or fades, and all that's left is a verdict of irrelevance, it's almost impossible to come back. But here's the kicker. All of these comedians, all of these satirists, all of these commentators weren't creating a narrative. They were reflecting one. They were channeling the frustration, the exhaustion, and the disbelief of the public itself. And that's why Meghan and Harry's image crisis wasn't just about a few jokes. It was about the sound of a story collapsing in real time. By this point, Meghan and Harry had been roasted by late-night hosts, parodied by puppets and cartoons, dismantled by stand-up comedians, and dismissed by political commentators. Question hanging in the air wasn't whether they were mocked, it was whether their public image could survive at all. Because here's the thing about comedy, it doesn't just entertain, it reveals. Comedians are like cultural truth tellers, dripping away the polished PR layers and exposing what people really think, but don't always say out loud. And when you look at Meghan and Harry's story through that lens, the verdict from the court of public opinion seems devastatingly clear. Jo Koy gave permission, Chris Rock exposed the absurdities, Simon Brodkin shredded the facade, Nikki Glaser cut away the illusions of grandeur, and Bill Maher delivered the philosophical knockout. Each one didn't just tell jokes, they delivered verdicts. And those verdicts, stacked together, formed a narrative that Meghan and Harry could no longer control. The cruel irony is that Meghan and Harry built their post-royal brand on controlling the narrative. They left the monarchy to speak freely, to tell their truth, to curate how the world saw them. For a while, it worked. The Oprah interview dominated headlines. The Netflix documentary pulled in millions of viewers. Their memoirs made headlines around the globe. But what they didn't realize, perhaps no one could realize until it was too late, is that once comedians decide your material, your truth no longer matters. Their punchlines become your story. Their exaggerations become the lens through which people see you. And that's exactly what happened here. Meghan and Harry's carefully curated brand of victimhood and independence was reframed as hypocrisy and fragility. Their insistence on being taken seriously was recast as arrogance. Their demand for privacy became the world's biggest joke. And now, instead of being seen as cultural reformers, they're seen as cultural punchlines. That doesn't mean they're finished forever. Celebrity culture is fickle, and reinvention is always possible. But the skill of this comedic onslaught makes reinvention harder. Because the jokes weren't just funny, they stuck. And once the public internalizes a joke about you, it's almost impossible to erase it. Monica Lewinsky rebuilt her life, but the jokes about her never disappeared. Paris Hilton pivoted into business, but people still remember the caricature. Meghan and Harry may find a new chapter, but they'll never fully outrun the punchlines. Which leads us to the haunting question, was this always inevitable? Was the royal fairy tale doomed the moment it collided with Hollywood's hunger for spectacle? Or did Meghan and Harry's own contradictions make them the perfect targets for mockery? The answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. But what's undeniable is this. Once the court of comedy delivers its verdict, it's the loudest verdict of all. So where does this leave Meghan and Harry? Can they rebuild their image, or are they forever defined by punchlines? The truth is, recovery is possible, but it comes at a cost. They would have to abandon the constant narrative control, step away from the spotlight they claim to hate, and allow their actions, not their interviews, to speak for them. But here's the problem. That would mean giving up the very thing they fought hardest to protect relevance. And that's why the comedian laughter cuts so deeply, because it exposes a reality Meghan and Harry. But here's the problem. That would mean giving up the very thing they fought hardest to protect relevance. And that's why the comedian's laughter cuts so deeply, because it exposes a reality Meghan and Harry may never be able to escape, that their story isn't theirs anymore. It belongs to the public, and the public has chosen to laugh. So maybe the final question isn't whether they can recover. Maybe it's whether they even want to. Because as long as they keep chasing the spotlight, the punchline will keep coming. And the world will keep asking, are Harry and Meghan still telling their story, or have they become the story everyone else tells about them?